On April 1st, yes, April Fool's Day 2022, Morbius was released into theaters nationwide and around the world. How appropriate. It would go on to be a critical and financial failure of such a massive scope that it would widely be mocked in meme culture and vanish from theaters in record time. Somehow, Hollywood executives took that mockery as a renewed interest and gave it a second wide release in 1,000 theaters. It failed just as quickly and vanished once more. April Fools indeed. Who let this happen? Who was responsible? Morbius was directed by Daniel Espinosa, who also did Life with Jake Gyllenhaal and Rebecca Ferguson, as well as Safe House with Reynolds and Denzel Washington. Both were terrific films. The cinematographer had previously been nominated for a BAFTA. The editor was a two-time Oscar winner. The star was an Oscar winner. The stunt coordinator was a driving force behind some of Hollywood's top blockbusters, and his work had helped bring in over $3 billion in box office sales. So what went wrong? Well, it turns out the writers have a fascinating resume. A resume that has helped several studios and producers lose over $500 million. Let's take a look at Matt Sazama and Burk Sharpless. Back in 2006, Matt Sazama had a 15-year-old second assistant editor credit. Burk Sharpless was the son of a history professor and congressional candidate from Middle America. Matt found a job as a production assistant working on the Santa Claus 3, and had recently met his future wife while she worked on Trek the Third. So in 2008, when Universal started trying to reboot Dracula for the 173rd time, or whatever, as Dracula Year Zero, Matt and Burk submitted their concept for a historically accurate take on the classic tale of Vlad the Impaler.
The writers started with Bram Stoker saying, okay, here we have Dracula in the 1800s, Victorian England. How did he decide to pick him, Vlad Tepes? Went back to the 1400s, and in the script they picked as much as they possibly could from history, and it sneaks in little ways if you know it, but it really is the story of Vlad Tepes. It's not the story of Victorian England Dracula. It's the story of how he got there.
Despite their lack of credits, their concepts win out in the room, and they're hired for the job. With the legitimacy of having the deal on paper, they continue to market themselves, and a couple of months later, they are hired by Columbia, then under Sony, to write the script for Flash Gordon. In 2011, they are quickly hired to write the script of the Atari game Missile Command. A couple months later, they are again hired to write the concept script based on the Hasbro game Clue. And finally, in 2011, the duo sells one of their own pitches to a production company, described as a futuristic Jungle Book. It should be noted that a pitch could be as simple as an idea explained over coffee. It does not mean a script has been written. It should be noted at this point that they've been officially hired for 5 jobs. At time of filming, Missile Command even still sits on their IMDb as an upcoming project. Okay, you're probably a step ahead of me here, realizing that only one of these jobs would actually complete production. In 2012, Alex Proyas, who had been recruited to direct Dracula Year Zero, was recruited by Summit Entertainment to direct what would become Gods of Egypt. This was during the height of popularity for the Hunger Games, and the studio was on the lookout for a franchise to take its place in 2016. Alex signed on and brought the boys with him. After all, why not? They'd worked together on Dracula, clearly had history, and they already had 5 major deals on paper. The script for Gods of Egypt was completed, and Alex moves forward into casting. Then suddenly, Universal kicks into action. They announce their Dark Universe, featuring the likes of Russell Crowe, Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, and Angelina Jolie as the bride. And it will all start with a now retitled Dracula Untold. The film was released and panned both critically and at the box office. Universal quickly denied that this project had anything to do with the Dark Universe, insisting that The Mummy was to be the first, even though Dracula, arguably the most popular name, was absent from their casting announcement. And after the failure of The Mummy, they officially scrapped the plans for the connected universe altogether and are now only considering standalone films. Okay, pause. Let's talk numbers for a moment. If a major picture is released, and they say it cost $70 million, and it makes $215 million, was the film successful? Actually, no. You see, the $70 million is the production budget. Studios will then spend up to that budget again advertising the project. Obviously, there's no set formula. Studios will create individual plans for each project. Get Out had a $4.5 million production budget, but reportedly spent over $70 million on advertising. Halloween had $75 million. A Quiet Place, $86 million. Split, $80 million. and each of those films only had a production budget of about $10 to $20 million. Looking slightly more high budget, The Last Jedi's budget was $200 million, but marketing was $185 million. Beauty and the Beast was $160 million versus $175 million for marketing. Despicable Me 3 had a budget of $80 million, a marketing budget of $149 million. But let's simplify. Let's just double the production budget for our estimates here. Okay, so we have our $70 million. Double that to $140 million with advertising. Surely the $215 is a good result, right? Again, no. Success is based on the theatrical release, and the theater isn't going to play the movie for free. Roughly, theaters and studios will split the revenue 50-50, so the theater will need to make up to $140 million in order for the studio to make that. Or, in other words, the $70 million movie will need to make $280 million before it sees its first dollar of profit. So the scorecard begins, and the first franchise falls. Fast forward to 2014. Vin Diesel was on the top of the world. Fast and the Furious 7 was on the way. He'd shot 3 movies as Richard B. Riddick, and those had spun off multiple video games and animations. And he had just signed on for a mystery role in the Marvel Studios. He was also an outspoken advocate of the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. So when Priest scribe Corey Goodman brought him the script for The Last Witch Hunter, based on one of Vin's own characters, not only was he naturally interested in the project, he was one of the few names in Hollywood who could make sure it came to fruition. With Vin Diesel on board, it wasn't long before the studio laid out a production budget of $90 million.
Which really sets up this franchise. This movie really is a franchise starter.
While waiting for release, Disney also hired the boys to write a live-action version of Night on Bald Mountain, one of the vignettes from Fantasia, and Netflix hires them to lead up the reboot for Lost in Space. Then, The Last Witch Hunter is released, and the project fails. 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. Their proposed sequel is abandoned. A second franchise fails. In 2015, Gods of Egypt was nearing completion, and the studio invested an extra $30 million into advertising, including buying an ad during the Super Bowl. However, the film faced heavy criticism due to it casting multiple white actors to play the Egyptian gods. Now we're going to adjust a little bit here. The math is not going to hold. Proving our estimates can be wrong, the Hollywood Reporter estimated that the project lost the studio over $90 million. All plans for sequels were scrapped. A third franchise falls. In 2016, after the failure of Gods of Egypt, as they worked on Lost in Space, Saban Entertainment decided to reboot Power Rangers. Multiple scripts had been penned and rejected, but Matt and Burk have a talent in selling their pitches. They talk it out and write the story that becomes the foundation for the film, a story that then gets rewritten by the screenwriters of the Sherlock Holmes sequel, and finally converted into a script by the Academy Award-nominated screenwriter of Flight. The Saban studio had bragged he had a 7-movie arc prepared, and the other scripts were in development, and the film fails. It's estimated to have lost the studio $74 million. All plans for all sequels are scrapped. A fourth franchise falls. In 2017, and somehow despite every major project that the boys have been involved in either not getting made or failing to an astounding degree, Sony hires the duo to write Morbius. Now we all know how that went. So instead, let me emphasize that they were hired in 2017. The script existed for years. This was not something that got just scraped out at last minute. It starred an Oscar-winning actor who demanded director approval. Apparently he forgot that it doesn't matter how good you are or who you get to direct if the script fails on the page. Jared, next time get script approval. Time passed as they worked on Lost in Space and Morbius, until finally in April of 2018, Season 1 of Lost in Space debuted on Netflix, and it was actually good. Of course, out of the 28 episodes, the duo only wrote 7. They are given executive producer credits, and that rarely equates to daily on-set involvement. They are never credited as showrunners or story editors, roles filled by Zach Estrin, Vivian Lee, and Daniel McClellan. Morbius was originally supposed to be released in 2020, but began its series of delays. Marvel announced that Matt and Burk would be connected to another future, as yet unnamed Marvel project, which would later be revealed to be Madame Webb. Lost in Space would end its run after the 3rd season in 2021, which was reduced to 8 episodes instead of the 10 of the preceding seasons. While some would argue that Season 3 was shot with COVID protocols in place, it's hard not to wonder if the declining viewership may also have been partly to blame for the reduced schedule. Finally, in 2022, on April Fool's Day, Morbius is finally released. If only it really had been an April Fool's joke. It vanished from theaters in a matter of days, only to be re-released into 1,000 theaters on June 3rd. Someone please explain to Sony that we were not laughing with them. It averaged less than $300 per screen and vanished once more. Somehow, this brings us to Madam Webb. Go back and look at the announcements leading up to the film. Burk and Sharpless hired to write. Not Burk and Sharpless given one last chance. Not we ran out of other options. Simple, unapologetic, talking about it like it's a good thing. Even its star couldn't come up with anything nice to say.
Did you take another souvenir or something that you could remember these films by? Or...
No, just my emotional trauma, which I will hold on to very tightly.
In a world where these assassins can cost Hollywood an estimated $500 million over the course of their career, where they can be paid for a long series of jobs that are never made, and the few that are made spell destruction for the studio behind it, while talented artists throw themselves on the mercy of endless film festivals and film award competitions, spending every dime and often going into debt in an effort to get a sliver of attention, just a chance at a fraction of the career that these two butchers have. We need to do better.
I can see the future. Oh, what the hell? She didn't see that coming? That's not how it works.
We deserve better, and it's not what we're going to get. Between January and August of 2024, there were 42 features given a wide release in theaters, and 38 of those are either a prequel or a sequel. Only 4 were original properties, compared to 77 in the same period in 2023. We need to clean out the executives who care about nothing more than the almighty dollar. Studios are risking more on less. Budgets are inflating to unbelievable levels. And it's not what's good. It's about, can you open a movie overseas? Somehow this all reminds me of some advice a producer I met at dinner once gave me. I was still fairly young in the industry and anxious to soak up every bit of wisdom I could glean. I asked him if there was one bit of advice I could learn early in the business, what was it? He mused quietly for a moment and responded, never work on a $10 million project if you can work on a $100 million project. I nodded, seemed fairly apparent, but explainable in so many ways, so I persisted. Well, sure, but why do you say that? Because if you're working on a $10 million project and try to steal $1 million, they'll notice. Okay, so let's try to get something positive out of this. What can we actually learn from Matt Sazama and Burk Sharpless? For one, they have to be amazing at pitching. Selling the script in the room is a practice skill, and clearly one they excel at. Figure out how to sell your projects. Practice it. Do it again. 2, how can you add value to a project?
One of the things that we added to it was the 3 Spider Women, who we meet them in a place where they haven't become yet. So really, one of the reasons we set it back in time is so that, first of all, Dakota Johnson could be in the movie. Yeah. But most importantly, to see 3 young women who, are destined, maybe, hopefully, if things go right, to become great heroes in a place where they are absolutely not that.
While the end result has clearly not done much, the idea that creates spin-off potentials clearly have sway. 3, be nice. While it's hard to find video examples, by all reports the pair are charming, nice, and incredibly easy to work with. They take notes from the studios and incorporate them. They write and rewrite projects until the executives are happy. They don't ask if this will make the project better or worse. They simply take orders with a smile. In the end, I do think there is something to learn here. There is a role that screenwriters envision, but there's also the understanding of the studio mechanic, whether you fight to conform to it or fight against it. While this video is full of estimation and guesswork, one thing that cannot be argued is that Matt and Burk remain in good standing and will soon be hard to work on their next project. So learn from these Hollywood assassins. Practice your pitch. Add value to any script you look at. But leave your integrity at the door.